There's nothing even vaguely human about this ferocious lizard-like beast. It was the top predator in the age before dinosaurs, 300 million years ago. But unlikely as it seems, this mammal-like reptile, or another creature like it, could be the source of humankind's mother-child bond. The proof is locked in the fossil record, and the key to our prehistoric past lies within our bodies. In the cellular data passed down by distant ancestors, encoded in our DNA. Advanced technology can now read the DNA of humans and other animals at incredible speeds. And we've learned how humans developed the ability to be caring parents. Earth's ancient life reproduced by laying eggs without fanfare. But at some point, their DNA changed radically, and the protection and rearing of offspring became instinctive. This is the story of great turning points in the development of life on Earth, and the key biological shifts that would finally make us human. This is South Africa. We're on the road to the Karoo Basin, a half-day's drive inland from Cape Town. It's a fossil-rich site from the Permian period, when the synapsids, mammals' reptilian-like ancestors, were Earth's top land species. For paleontologist Roger Smith, it's one of the best places to see the diversity of life on Earth before the mass extinctions that would wipe out so much of it. The deposits of shale and sandstone here are more than 250 million years old, predating the age of dinosaurs. Stretches of fossilized bedrock look like a moonscape, but this place was once the Serengeti of its time.
This area, all these pools would have been filled with standing water. This is the edge of the pool with the what we call wrinkle marks here, where the wind was blowing on the wet sand, and then the oscillation ripples where the water was just lapping up here.
Picture great herds of ancient animals drinking from a water hole or grazing on plants along the riverbank.
Look at these fantastic footprints. Here's a large animal that walked past here 260 million years ago.
This trail of claw-like tracks clearly belonged to a serious predator. One of the mammal-like reptiles distantly related to us.
Fingers down into
Smith says its gait may look awkward, but this animal could move fast and efficiently.
Back, trim, up to here. 1, 2, 3, 4.
This fossil belongs to Gorgonopes, one of the period's key predators. It was a medium-sized creature that looks like a cross between a lizard and a vicious dog. But the discovery of another important fossil here indicates that the seeds of maternal instinct were somehow sprouting in these animals' genetic makeup. Paleontologist Jennifer Bota-Brink studies the evolution of parental care from fossils. The remains she and her colleagues unearthed are 245 million years old. It's possible that this pair of cynodonts, another ancestor of mammals, shows the earliest signs of a parental bond. A closer look reveals something remarkable. Two skulls, one large, one small, nose to nose. The one on the left is thought to be the mother, and on the right, its offspring. The fossilized pair was found in one burrow, nestled close together.
Those animals must have had some kind of care and some kind of feeling of affection for their offspring. So I don't know if these animals love their babies the way human beings love their babies, but we definitely see the beginning of something, of some kind of perhaps affection during the Middle Triassic.
This fossil suggests that maternal behavior may have already existed as far back as 200 million years ago. Though how cynodonts cared for their young is far from clear. But if cynodonts only hint at the origins of the parental-child bond, in Australia, there's a living fossil that shows how this behavior likely came about. Researchers come looking for it in the forests of Tasmania. It's a timid animal, so he has to search under every rock and tree stump. But there's the reluctant subject. It's a short-beaked echidna, descended from the same line as the platypus. Echidnas first appeared about 20 million years ago, and they share some of the same primitive anatomical features as the cynodonts. Both platypus and echidna are monotremes, the only living mammals that lay eggs. When the egg is the size of a grape, it's released from the female's reproductive tract to her pouch, and it stays here for another 10 days. When it's time to hatch, the baby echidna pierces the shell with its tooth and hauls itself into the mother's pouch. It suckles by pressing its face against the mother's skin. Monotremes feed their young by secreting milk almost like sweat from patches on the skin. It's a primitive form of breast milk, and it's delivered this way since echidnas lack nipples. The puggle, as it's called, feeds inside the female's pouch for nearly 2 months, until it has spikes. But she continues to suckle her young until it's more than 6 months old. This fossil of mother and child suggests that cynodonts may have nurtured their offspring in much the same way. Olaf Oftedal believes that when ancient life began to nourish their offspring with milk, it was an important step toward maternal bonding. He's been tracing the evolution of mammalian breast milk for over 30 years.
Well, obviously, feeding your baby is more than just providing milk, because it's also providing a loving care, it's giving support, encouragement. And the question is, why does she do this? How have the period of dependence of the young evolved in such a way to balance all of the different forces acting on her in evolution, acting on the child? This is what we hope to understand through studying the evolution of milk.
Oftedal says that body contact, holding infants close while breastfeeding, surely reinforced the bonding instincts of the planet's early life as well. The surprise is just how long ago the evolution of milk began. But because milk glands don't fossilize, science relies on the living fossil echidna for a glimpse into milk's origins. They look at the structure of glands in its skin and how the echidna reproduces. Unlike ancient birds, mammal ancestors made porous eggs that lost moisture, leaving them vulnerable. So secretions covering an unhatched egg might have functions unrelated to nutrition. Two key substances were found in echidna milk. The first is alpha-lactalbumin. It's the nutrient-rich protein in breast milk, essential for infant health. The second is lysozyme, an enzyme that kills bacteria. Like the echidna, its ancestors may have secreted antimicrobial fluids through their skin to protect their eggs. What's striking to scientists are the structures of these two proteins in milk, given their different functions. When the two proteins are superimposed, they look nearly identical. And this led Oftedal to argue that milk's origins date back millions of years, though its composition has changed over time.
So we think there was this gradual transformation of a protective fluid that provided moisture and stopped the microbes that were damaging to something that was more nutritious, and that this more nutritious aspect of milk was already well established before the mammalia forms came about.
The nourishing of life with milk was a milestone in evolution. Let's rewind the clock to the time Oftedal thinks this innovation in feeding began. We're back in the Permian period 300 million years ago, long before dinosaurs walked the Earth. These lizard-like predators, called dimetrodons, are distantly related to mammals, despite their reptilian good looks. The large spiny sails on their backs may have been used for sexual display and to absorb heat from the sun. When their body temperatures rose, thanks to the stored heat, dimetrodons would be battle-ready. Once they sprang into action, there was no stopping them. At the time, dimetrodons were Earth's super predators. But being the top species failed to give them an edge when it came to raising offspring. The eggs they laid probably had porous shells covered with soft membranes, essential for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. But if the sun were too hot, they could easily dry out, putting embryos at risk. So dimetrodons and others had to develop a way to keep their eggs moist and free of deadly bacteria. A coating of protective fluid would do the trick. This was a baby step on the long road to true maternal care. But it meant that intrinsic genetic changes would prompt major new behavioral shifts in life on Earth. They all began at the cellular level, in ancient DNA. Within DNA was a gene that produced the bacteria-killing protein lysozyme. But that didn't happen overnight. Alterations in milk-related genes would literally take ages. At some point, the part of the gene that produces lysozyme changed. And that triggered a slight mutation in the protein structure that gene would now carry. The result was alpha-lactalbumin. Again, that's the nutrient-rich protein that became the key component of breast milk. Thanks to a random genetic event, nutrients were now secreted along with antibacterial enzymes to keep developing life fed and healthy. And this caused sweeping change in the parent-offspring bond as hatchlings began suckling their mother's milk. Youngsters grew dependent on their mothers for nourishment, and mothers more protective, while an ever-ready food source allowed them to thrive. All mammals would inherit these milk-related genes and reap the benefits of this great leap in evolution. Mother's milk would forever change the dynamic between parent and offspring and create the foundation for maternal love. But there would be serious obstacles in the road before true mammals arrived on Earth. Back in South Africa's Karoo Basin, the extraordinary geological record allows science to see exactly who would survive in coming eras. Roger Smith can point to ancient species here that were clearly developing strong familial bonds.
Oh, look at this. Hey, look at this. This is a burrow cast of Diectodon.
This rock formation is a 250 million year old burrow cast of the mammal-like reptile Diectodon. And this is the full length of its ancient burrow, spiraling 5 feet downward from the surface. Inside the burrows, researchers sometimes find the fossilized remains of several Diectodons nestled together. They think Diectodons may have nested communally. And from the many closely huddled Diectodons here, they assume they were sociable animals. They may have lived their lives underground, a lot like modern gophers, but in close-knit groups instead of solo. Roger Smith says that by cooperating, they had a much better chance of surviving in their arid environment. But there are signs here of an apocalypse, the world's deadliest extinction event that would nearly wipe them out as well. This 250 million year old band of Earth is the dividing line. The red zone is rich in fossils of synapsids, mammal-like reptiles of the late Permian. Higher up, there are almost none. A fossil site called the Last Pool shows the extent of the devastation. Throngs of starving animals came to shrinking watering holes, desperate to quench their thirst. What they found were toxic dregs, and they all became victims of a massive global die-off.
That drying has been caused, or is most likely to have been caused by volcanic eruptions in the northern part of Pangaea, in what we know as the Siberian Traps. Rapid global warming at a rate far too fast for most of the terrestrial organisms and the marine ones to adapt, so most of them went extinct.
How did this epic disaster unfold? To find out, we'll have to return to the final days of the Permian period. This is Earth some 250 million years ago. By this time, mammalian ancestors were nursing their young. And the lush habitat would lead to the arrival of new species and greater diversity in animal life. Among the vertebrates, fossils suggest that diectodons produced the most offspring, though they were vulnerable to sharp-toothed carnivores. Diectodons found refuge in their burrows. But they too would feel the impact of the event that would soon devastate the planet. Volcanic eruptions would spew lava across miles of what is now Siberia. Enough to cover the entire surface of the planet had it been able to spread that far. This event continued for 1 million years and may have caused the extinction of 90% of life on Earth. The volcanic eruptions sent vast amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the skies, poisoning the atmosphere. This triggered rapid global warming and desertification on a massive scale. Most of the mammalian ancestors wouldn't make it through this extinction event. And for another 1 million years, there was a huge void in their lineage. But a few managed to survive. And with the competition gone, this group would ultimately give rise to our ancestors, Earth's first mammals. This is Liaoning Province in northeast China, and the road to the next chapter of life on Earth. This area is rich in the remains of the descendants of animals that survived the mass extinctions. Many date back to the dinosaur age. In 2011, a tiny new fossil species found here made big news. It turned out to be the earliest known ancestor of placental mammals like humans. Ji Zhang of the Chinese Academy of Geological Sciences is part of the team that discovered the 160 million-year-old animal. And this is it. Juramaia sinensis, the Jurassic mother from China. Less than 4 inches long and lighter than a chipmunk. Our ancestor Juramaia was a shrew-like forager that climbed trees and fed on insects in temperate Jurassic forests. But as Ji Zhang soon discovered, this humble animal had undergone great physical change. Change proving that one line of early mammals had found a novel way of nurturing their young. Instead of laying eggs like monotremes, or carrying immature offspring in pouches like marsupial ancestors, they developed new anatomy.
After careful analysis of the characteristics of this fossil, we concluded that this animal had an organ, a placenta, for nurturing her offspring inside her womb. All mammals that have a placenta, including human beings, of course, are descended from Juramaia.
The placenta connects an unborn fetus to the uterine wall. With it, a pregnant mother can nourish and maintain the fetus through an umbilical cord. It delivers vital oxygen and nutrients to a baby and also removes waste from its blood. Earlier animal species encased their fertilized embryos in shells. And then they laid their eggs. But sometime during the late Jurassic period, life would make another evolutionary leap. Inside a fertilized egg, a sac, now connected to the mother's body, would change the way nutrients were delivered and waste removed. It eventually became the placenta, and the new eutherians, or placental mammals, were conceived and carried to term inside their mother's wombs. The 160 million-year-old Juramaia is the oldest known placental mammal to give live birth to relatively mature young. What triggered this key evolutionary split from other mammals is a mystery. But for this early ancestor, it was a brilliant new survival strategy. Let's head back to the late Jurassic, to Juramaia's time. Earth was now green and thickly forested. By this time, enormous, ferocious dinosaurs walked the planet like they owned the place, which they did. It hadn't always been this way. Dinosaurs evolved over tens of millions of years from a line of small primitive reptiles that had survived the mass extinctions. Before Juramaia appeared, mammal-like animals were still laying eggs. They were small as mice, an easy prey for dinosaurs. Forced to flee, a parent would have had no way of safeguarding its nest. But when Jeremiah came along, it had built-in protection for its unborn young. Living in the treetops was a perfect low-profile niche for small animals, and it kept them safe from most predators. But there were exceptions, like the feathered dinosaur Anchiornis. Even when danger loomed, the pioneering mammal would never have to abandon her unborn young thanks to the placenta. The rest would be up to her survival skills and chance. This new evolutionary adaptation would lead to an explosion of mammals in future eras and new kinds of maternal bonds. But back in the late Jurassic, the placenta greatly increased the survival rate of Earth's tiny mammals compared with egg-laying cousins.
Huge dinosaurs dominated the Earth 160 million years ago, when Jeremiah were alive. Jeremiah were much smaller and weaker compared to these dinosaurs. So they faced a harsh battle for survival. Their tough environment meant that placenta played a major role in ensuring their offspring lived on.
How mammals suddenly developed this new organ to carry their offspring to term has been somewhat of a puzzle. But recent genetic studies have shed light on the transformation. Husband and wife research team Fumitoshi and Tomoko Ishino made a critical connection.
The placenta was a totally new organ. We believe that the acquisition of a new gene was absolutely necessary for making this new organ.
The Ishinos were responsible for identifying that gene. It's called the PEG10. A lab experiment with mice shows how it works. This is the fetus of an ordinary mouse. The placenta is on the left. And this is what happens when the PEG10 gene doesn't function. The placenta is very small, and the fetus fails to grow to its full size.
If there's no PEG10 gene, the cells in the most important part of the placenta do not multiply. That's why the outside is formed, but not the inside. So we know this gene is vital for making the placenta.
The evidence shows that the PEG10 gene appeared suddenly more than 160 million years ago. And from then on, it was passed down to a number of mammals. But how exactly was this gene created? the Ishino team's findings revealed an unexpected detail. The PEG10 gene closely resembles another gene present in something undesirable, a retrovirus that replicates in host cells, causing a variety of illnesses. Two sets of codes that express this virus are also present in the PEG10 gene. Their analysis of ancient mammal genomes led the Ishinos to this conclusion. The retrovirus was encoded in our ancestors' DNA and passed on to their descendants. It evolved into the PEG10 gene and the chance creation of the placenta. The Ishinos' hypothesis defied all conventional wisdom. It was unthinkable that a gene from a flu virus, for example, could be encoded in our DNA, much less passed down to future generations. But such a phenomenon currently exists and is posing serious threats to Australia's iconic koala population. A retrovirus known as CORV has been spreading rapidly among koalas, making them vulnerable to infectious disease, in much the same way the AIDS virus functions in humans. What stunned researchers was the composition of the chromosomes of the infected male sperm. The bright points of light are the DNA from the retrovirus. An ordinary virus won't enter either sperm or eggs, animals' vital reproductive cells. But this retrovirus has managed to penetrate the DNA of male koala sperm cells, and the viral gene is now integrating itself into the sperm DNA. It means that infected parents transmit DNA with this dangerous viral gene to their offspring, who then pass it further down the line to new generations of koalas.
And what surprised us was that in the animals in Queensland, CORV was actually embedded in germline tissue. In other words, it was a embedded element of the koala chromosome, and an inheritable element at that.
If this kind of viral invasion of DNA can occur in modern mammals, the Ishinos reason that the same thing probably happened to our mammalian ancestors in the Jurassic. But back then, when the retroviral gene entered the DNA of Jeremiah, they believe it was the placenta-producing PEG10 gene that evolved.
Our ancestors acquired a gene from a retroviral infection. During the long evolutionary process, creatures have made quite a few great changes in themselves by taking advantage of these surprising chance occurrences.
In humans, placenta have one remarkable function that scientists believe came from a virus. It's the ability to suppress the mother's immune system. Though mother and child couldn't be closer than during pregnancy, they're still individuals, sometimes with different blood types, for example. Why then wouldn't the mother's immune system regard a fetus as a kind of foreign invader, like a virus or an implant, and attack it? Because the placenta biochemically cloaks the fetus from harm by suppressing the mother's immune response. A retrovirus also has the ability to suppress attacks from immune responses in order to infect a host. The Ashinos think this ability was transmitted to our mammal ancestors when retroviral genes were integrated into their DNA. And this prompted the new leap in evolution. Let's see how that change came about back in the Jurassic period, when the placenta first appeared. This was a time of great contrasts. The age when giant carnivorous dinosaurs still ruled the earth, and mammals were tiny, thriving in part because they were hard to see. They were primitive and still produced offspring by laying eggs. But something strange was happening. Lethal retroviruses had begun to attack the population. Infections spread quickly, until finally, the epidemic threatened to kill off every last one of them. It looked bad for mammals, until chance intervened. The few that managed to survive the deadly infections were undergoing some major changes. Retroviruses were now coursing through their bodies, and they were making a beeline for the reproductive cells. The goal of the viruses is to embed their own genes in their host, so they're aiming straight for the cell's nuclei, the place where transmittable DNA is locked away. Once there, the retrovirus slices through the host DNA and splices its own gene into the existing strand. And this eventually became the PEG10 gene that would alter mammal anatomy. The viral gene would be passed down from generation to generation. Until at some point, the PEG10 gene kicks into gear. It starts to develop a new organ, the placenta. And this chance new adaptation begins to create profound change in the way mammals produce their offspring. Jeremiah was the first in a long line of mammals, including humans, to give live birth. A clever choice in ecological niche and a radical change in anatomy saw ancient mammals through the perils of the dinosaur age and beyond. And over the course of the next 160 million years, a parade of mammals and their offspring would form strong new bonds and thrive across the planet. Through evolution, the function of the placenta was enhanced, and gestation periods grew longer. Fully mature offspring are now born after months within the safety of their mother's womb. During these long gestation periods, the fetus depends solely on its mother for nutrients and oxygen, obliging her to eat for 2 or more. But the maternal bond has evolved far beyond the feeding of newborn young. Like many mammals, polar bears offer their cubs years of care and will risk their own lives to defend them. And the same is true of human mothers who nurture and protect their young for as long as 10 months before giving birth. Instincts honed over the ages forge powerful bonds, even before the baby arrives. During labor and delivery, hormones released by the placenta only increase maternal feelings. While skin contact between mother and newborn stimulates the so-called love hormones, oxytocin and prolactin, and sometimes even creates a euphoric state. Such complex feelings and physical response are woven into the story of motherhood. A story of deepening love that began with a transformation in ancient DNA and lives on in human beings everywhere. Great leaps in evolution are amazing and unpredictable. What if the genes of milk production had never evolved in prehistoric life, allowing it to nurse? What if our mammalian ancestors had never acquired the genetic means to change their lives and ours by giving birth? Then the bond between mother and child may have turned out differently. But that would be someone else's story.